one more AI expert, right? Back to AI. You know what? I'm tired of it, honestly. I put a sticker downstairs. I'm going to talk about how a proven AI framework could, emphasis on could, speed up product decisions and speed up growth based on recent startup experiences and consulting engagements, but also backed by, let's say, the technology experience that I had before, helping me to engineer certain systems and patterns and also understand the limitations of the technology a little bit better. So on the AI expert part, just so you know me a little bit and how my path has shaped what I do today, I originally started in health tech. I'm actually a third-generation biomedical engineer in our family, but then I went to the dark side of business. You know, how did that happen? So now I try to help teams in various companies identify where AI could bring value, and if that is the case, then how to scale the pilots that they already have in-house. So now I've expanded beyond health tech, working with manufacturing clients, fintech, SaaS. And through that journey, I managed to do quite a few things. So first of all, I worked with a lot of people, and I think that gave me a very intercultural perspective, not just in Europe, but US, China, India, over 60 people in total. And the capability team I was responsible for delivered 10 plus business critical innovations that actually landed into products over time, medical products. And that contributed overall, some of those innovations also came from myself, to 100 million in AI portfolio impact for my employer at the time. More recently, as head of growth in a Silicon Valley startup last year, I helped the team double the user base in less than 3 months. It was a B2B startup focusing on product managers, and that's where I would say many of the learnings that I'm going to share today come from. And when it comes to AI, I've been working and building these systems for over 8 years. Building means like from the neuron upwards, so really dissecting them, training them, configuring them based on what you have on the market, not just using ChatGPT. Okay, so let's talk about promises of AI, right? So I'm trying to make this a little bit more product focused. Perfect ideas, right? We don't have to think anymore. It's all there. It's all learned. Instant answers. To some degree, yes, but are they good? No research needed. We don't have to talk to users anymore, right? So it's all there. We can auto-design our UI. GTM's one click. This is my favorite. Production apps in seconds, right? No need to test for performance, security, whatnot. It doesn't matter. We can do it. And then after that, you get guaranteed PMF, right? How can you not? The reality is a little bit different, I feel. I think it's powerful, the technology, generative AI technology specifically today. It helps us cluster insights. It helps us extract useful patterns, useful signals from the data, helps us do research faster. I wish I had this when I was a scientist, honestly. I think I would ran my simulations and got my evidence a lot faster back then. You can do messaging tests. You can do rapid prototyping, not production apps, but prototyping, definitely. And then we can prove value, we can prove functionality, look at friction. Process automation has been around even before generative AI, just that with generative AI we have more options nowadays. When it comes to GTM, content drafts, though I think nowadays there's just too much noise there, so you have to be really careful with this part. And then there's a favorite one of mine, which I still try to work on now, which is lead scoring and qualifying prospects, analyzing that data, building workflows around that. I'm really passionate about that part. Okay, but what does that mean for product teams today? How does the workflow change? Because that's how I look at it. I don't really think about tools. I usually think in systems and workflows. And nowadays I work a lot with software engineering teams, and I think product teams are very similar in that sense that it's a socio-technical system. So you have ways of working. You have the data, you have the coding part, you have requirements gathering, you have talking to users, you have personal preferences, personal skills, team rituals, all of that playing together with the tools your team is using, and now we're adding AI. So what does that mean? What does that mean for our teams today? There's productivity, sure. To give an example from software engineering, recent large-scale Stanford study, I think the largest scale so far from developer productivity mentioned that we could get several tens of percents depending on what type of project you're running, but it is not guaranteed. It really very much depends on how you integrate into your team, your workflow, whether you're just amplifying something that is already bad as a process, as a workflow, or are you amplifying something that is good? Like, have you done the design of the way you work first? And I think, like, in a lot of teams, that's where true leverage is. And so based on the recent, let's say, experiences and also backed by my tech experience, I've developed a little framework to applying and testing different, let's say, AI, I wouldn't call them tools, workflows, because the examples that I'm going to give, the stories I'm going to tell, are more workflows than tools. Because in the end, when we do product development, innovation, we want evidence, right? So we're looking for evidence when we're searching the idea space, when we're validating our problem, when we're validating our GTM, when we're checking whether, let's say, the flows that we design into our application are actually causing friction or actually adding value, easy for the user. And so I've kind of split it into several loops that can be run individually, can be run sequentially, combined, however you need based on where your team's at and where your bottleneck is in your workflow. Because, like, I'm sure a lot of people are using AI today, like, to a certain degree, right? So the first part is opportunity. So I already mentioned, right, signal extraction, pattern matching, helping you define a clear problem or clearer ideas for your next product or product features. Validation, so you can test messaging, measure user intent, clarify early value. Then one of my favorites is prototyping, right? So you can build POCs really fast, and that means you can test for functionality for UI, UX. And then GTM, where we can do content drafting, lead scoring, and do not just the test of messaging, whether it lands, but how does it land? Does it land well? Do we need to tweak more? Are we actually, do that final step so that you actually get traction? And so now I'm going to talk about each one of these briefly, and for each one I'm going to tell a little story. Okay. Lost control. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Opportunity. So let's talk about opportunity. So what do we do? We want to define the problem. We want to find whether the problem is real or made up. How large is it? Are people even caring? So where can AI help in this situation? Already mentioned the signals and patterns. I think aggregation of those patterns is also a good one, and language models are pretty decent at that, especially if you tune them through prompts or fine-tuning. Persona drafts, this is a concept we experimented with and with some success, and it helps you surface hypotheses. But the systems are not intelligent, so they help you, but I would emphasize they do not replace your thinking. They amplify your thinking or lack thereof. It depends. Okay, so what are the outputs that we're getting in this case? And we're looking at is we want a clear problem statement. We want to narrow down the segment of people who are actually interested, users, buyers. In our case, it was a mix of both. Then early willingness signals. Some tools that we've explored, and this space has been evolving. I mean, these stories come from early 25, but we used them in raw form, and we clipped them together because we're engineers. What else are we going to do? We're just going to build stuff, right? But yeah, you can, and I think nowadays you have very mature low-code, no-code orchestrators, so you can mix and match. Perplexity, Gemini. Reddit Answers is a good one. There was a better tool than that called Gummy Search that actually focused on identifying opportunities on Reddit, clustering together pain points, potential solution asks, these kinds of things. I don't know why they went bust, but it doesn't exist anymore. Reddit Answers trying to do that, but they're not quite there. So let's talk about it, opportunity in practice. So what problem did we have when we were starting up as a B2B SaaS product, obviously integrating lots of AI, engineers, product people. We had many messy calls. We had buyers, users, varying needs, all mixed. Lots of data analysis to do. And I would say hard to find patterns because we were doing volume. We were doing hundreds of calls. And so what we've done is first we designed a process around that. We designed conversation scripts, and only then did we start to build the tool. So we built a mini pipeline in Google Sheets using AppScript. We attached the model APIs to that. We had prompts, we had examples, we had curated supplemental data set in there. And that helped us to identify early insights, refine our personas, and refine our jobs to be done. And so we ended up in clarity within days overall. I mean, we went through this loop a couple of times, but at least like it gave us the understanding which segments to hit, which features to build first, and also messaging. So how do we approach the market? So let's talk about validation. So here we want to check whether we have problem value fit, test whether our messaging actually lands already, and measure maybe early intent. Where can AI help here? The first part is very interesting, and we've tried that, and it can work, which is messaging and design feedback. So messaging feedback, that's textual, design feedback, that's the visual part, the vision transformers. Why I'm saying it can work, because again, these systems are not intelligent. They are mimicking the intelligence that has been trained in from that data that they have consumed so far. So that means it might hit in the sense like when you go to actual users, it might not. So for us, the success rate was, I don't know, 60, 70%. But it gives you speed. It does, honestly. But I wouldn't obsess over that part. Again, the analysis part, so we're returning to signal analysis, pattern matching. So in this case, we're looking for conversation analysis and signals from users, so early feedback signals. What we want to get out of this loop is simply, well, do we continue with this? Do we need to tweak it a little bit? Or we drop it, right? Also, rolling into the GTM part slowly, messaging patterns that actually work. And then, is there some demand for this? So that we understand that. Tools we've tested, so transcription tools, again, dime a dozen these days. We've used Fireflies, we've used Tactic before that, and then we use GPT and Claude. At this point, we're already operating a fast API server instead of Google Sheets, so more developer mode. Tried Dovetail, but let's say cost consideration. So what I find valuable today is that if you are a developer, if you're a technical person, if you like to build, you can build pretty fast if you know what you're doing. And so we did that. So in the case that I'm going to continue showing, I'm going to talk about more workflows that we've built. So for validation, what we had was some ideas that are worth exploring, features that didn't quite have the value story just yet. Lack of clarity on our messaging. So, we had the first ideas based on the, let's say, synthetic personas that we designed based on the conversations. But as I said, there's no guarantee that it will actually land. And our conversion on the user funnel was still spotty. And so we did another workflow powered by the GPT model, extracted signals from there, created new messaging variations, and we tracked messaging patterns that actually landed in conversations now. So we started to look, okay, so are we, what's our connection acceptance ratio? What's our call booking ratio? What's our user conversion ratio? So we're adding metrics in there, and then we are basically adjusting the assets that make up the workflow based on that. So based on that, we could better identify the features that we want to run with for prototyping, for production, then higher reply and booking rate over time, and the validated patterns and a clear direction for GTM. So we had all the material we need from here to go to GTM. And in that sense, now we go to prototype, but you could actually from here segue into GTM and focus more on the growth part. But I'm going to talk about prototype because I still love prototyping. What you do is you build prototypes, but I emphasize you should really build them in a focused manner. I think that the problem today is the problem of infinite code. You can generate it in seconds, literally in seconds, right? And you can build something that is workable. But the problem when it comes to developing software was never writing code. It was understanding what to code in the first place, right? So we want to test functionality here. We want to check for early friction. And where AI is good at is, firstly, refining your specifications, right? So play a little bit with, planning different scenarios, different variants, think through the process, take the cognitive load. You're going to be grateful for it later. Then once you have that plan, you start generating prototype code, and you review and improve the result, obviously, right? So again, like depending on your background, might be easier or harder, but I would say you get a working prototype, but oftentimes when you take that prototype to production, you generate a lot of technical depth if you do it without thinking through the process first, the specification, planning, and actually reviewing. So you build something that works, but then you have to re-engineer the whole thing. Outputs, usability signals, right? Clarity on flow, friction, and the direction for the next iteration. So what else are we wanting to build, and what can we take to production already now out of what we've just prototyped, right? Tools we've used, several ones, right? Continue to exist, and again, it depends on your technical background. For product people, I'd recommend Lovable or their cousins, Replit, Bolt. It works. If you're more technical, then you might be interested in Cursor or Cloud Code. All the rage these days, but Cloud Code is very powerful. I like it. GitHub Copilot's more of autocomplete on steroids, but different purposes for these two. So I personally interchangeably using Cloud Code and GitHub Copilot. Right, so prototype loop in action for us, we wanted to add substance to the ideas that we had. We wanted features to materialize and let the users play with it. So what have we done? We refined specs using Claude. We used Cursor for prototyping at the time. I mean, now as I said, I'm using Claude Code, but a Cursor works. It really is a question of preference. We've also added feedback points in our application so that we had an additional source of data. Because today, that's the thing, like you get answers from the language models that look plausible, that seem well and nice, but at the end of the day, it boils down to the quality of your input data. So we were constantly obsessed, how can we add more data, how can we add more signals in a meaningful way, structured. We updated the existing pipeline, and that allowed us to synthesize new insights. So we already had the conversation flow. We were less talking with users at that time, more with buyers, but still, we had that part as well. And so that helped us, first of all, the prototyping part, we could do that in days, right, to really ready-made features that we could put in the hands of users, identify friction points faster, and a clear focus for what to take to production. Last one, GTM. I like that too, honestly, because I was never a marketing guy, but last 2 years I've done a lot of things related to content creation, lead generation, lead scoring, prospect research. I'm still doing some of the latter part. And so I'm pretty passionate about this part. So here, even though I'm not going to talk about it in the story, you test relevant channels, you iterate on content, you want to qualify leads. So I'm talking more B2B, I would say. For B2B, we're really obsessed with the last one. So what you can get with AI today, particularly the generative kind, is personalization at scale, especially if you do it right. If you have previous examples, previous expertise, right, both of that, so data and expertise, those are the two key components. If you have that, you're going to fly. Prospect research, what I'm doing now as well, lead scoring, so once you have that research, how do we score that, how do we prioritize outreach, and then, of course, response analysis, just like with the user conversations for opportunity mapping, similar story here. We want to identify the channels that work best. Obviously, we want a qualified lead pipeline, and we want early traction signals, right? So are we actually converting? How many? Where's the drop-off point during our application? And tools we've tested for content generation, you have the classics here for data analysis, and in this case, let's say outreach script creation, which is Claude. But then there are some more, I would say, exotic ones like Relevance AI, which we use specifically for their LinkedIn integrations because that allowed us to pull prospect data, company data. We also added conventional web search on top of that. Runway ML is a tool that I personally like. I don't use it these days, but I used it back then, is because they focused on filmmakers specifically. So it's AI video, yes, but their UX is very interesting, and it's really, they're really obsessed of making this tool usable for people who actually, do clips and films, and they participate in festivals. So they're, it's not Soros slop. So, and it really offered control for the videos and the scenes, the concepts you wanted to illustrate. So I quite like that one. Okay, so let's talk about GTM in practice. For us, I already kind of touted a little bit. what we were doing. Basically, we wanted to see how much traction are we getting already with the validated messages. Can we improve that further? We wanted to get more insights on our conversion funnel. We had a very large volume of outreach, basically over 100 outreach per 2 weeks-ish, and we're pretty aggressive with that. We could be, and we were, obsessed with improving the quality of that. Now, obviously, like if you look at the end-to-end flow, that's a small bit. Then you have the conversation itself, etc. So we weren't, let's say, obsessing about it as much, because you could say like, let's do call to user conversion, or let's say acceptance to call conversion. Let's do it 1 percentage point more, etc. But actually, like there's a lot more magic going on in the actual call and the actual conversations. Okay, so we designed the process first and foremost again. So how do we do outreach? What's the sequence? What are the steps? Do we want like what kind of script do we have for buyers, for users? How many stages? Maybe also had different scenarios of that. Then we did AI-driven prospect research. Very good. This is very helpful. So aggregation of information, curated, validated. So we're selective in the channels that we used for that. Allowed us to refine messaging even further. And that's a separate story. We also had like a content workflow for copy and filling out carousel templates, but that's like a smaller impact overall. And I think, like, again, today, there's just so much of that. I don't even, I can't even be passionate about, AI-driven content anymore. Like, I write myself these days as much as I can. But anyway, tracked funnel conversions. And we ended up with a reply booking rate when it came to prospective buyers. And let's say we were still sourcing some users through outreach as well, but we were already converting through organic, through content, ads and organic content. We validated messaging patterns further. And yes, we did produce content faster, but that wasn't, I would say, the major contribution of the funnel at that stage. And yeah, this helped us get a strong GTM product loop. So from here, we actually could feed back into opportunity and start identifying new features, improve the current ones. So why does this system work? Well, I mean, it's not a one-shot thing. It's not a panacea, so to say. I explicitly try to make it modular and flexible, and I reiterate, it's about the workflow, not the tools. I think we all feel that AI accelerates research. I've personally witnessed it helps with messaging testing, with content production, data analysis, even before generative AI. I mean, I was doing classical ML, I was doing deep learning, very good stuff, still works, still has business value in a lot of places, but everybody wants to do LLMs, I don't know why. Each loop ends with a clear signal to continue or stop. So I'm a data person, right? I think if you do not have a few metrics at the end, you're not really sure whether you're adding value, performance to your team or not. So it's true also for other processes, because in Teams, for example, we had QMS system being introduced, and so we wanted to see whether, let's say, that will allow us to create more machine learning models or less, probably less, right? So add more extra documentation. But then we had a specific measurement of deployment times, QA times, etc., so that we have an indication of the impact. And then we also tune the process in that case so that we can, look back and see, okay, if we tune the process, can we actually minimize the impact of additional documentation? So here it's a similar thinking that I was thinking. And then you avoid long time commitment. I mean, today, AI is changing super fast, right? So I think, you need to run small experiments, a few metrics. And teams can, of course, run one component or several, depending on where your bottlenecks are. Always start with a bottleneck. If you don't have a bottleneck, don't use it. Simple. How to start using it, if you want to. Choose a real roadblock, a real problem. Where are you spending too much time? Where are there too many manual steps? Where are there transfers between systems? Start with the loop that gives you the fastest evidence. Like, what's the What's the loop where we can run a really small, really fast experiment and see the value? Don't pick too many tools. You know, I say here 1 to 2 tools, but honestly, if you're capable, if you're curious, build your own workflow. You have a process, you have a way of working in your team that works, that is your expertise. You probably have the data to support that. Build it. You know, you have very good orchestrator these days. As I said, pick a couple of signals. We don't want to obsess over metrics, but 2 or 3 is good. And then, well, this one is obvious. Keep the learnings in one place so that everybody can benefit, not just you as a product leader or as a, you know, the enthusiast that is pushing this pilot. And yeah, I'm happy to discuss how AI can accelerate product work in your team or just geek out on AI, language models, whatever, you know. Happy to talk to you and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Artur. We have quite a lot of questions from the audience, and I think we have a couple of minutes to answer them. First, do you think designers should learn to prototype in code, or do dedicated design tools still play an essential role in product development?
I think dedicated design tools still play a role. I mean, I'm not a designer, obviously, but I talked to some designers, and I've been hearing good things about Figma Make, because I believe let's say the large vendors who already optimized for design workflows, they have the expertise, they have the data also to back it up, to test it on, to develop it on, can actually produce useful features, right? That said, I think it is an interesting time to learn some degree of coding, or at least like how to solve a problem, how to think through a problem in terms of like pseudocode architecture and these kinds of things, because today we have amplifiers, right, that allow us to build tools very, very fast. Like, I'm a very big fan of one software. That means for myself, you know, or for you, any one of you, right? And if you learn the essence of programming, that will help you just move faster and reliably, most importantly, when you build these tools.
Great. Another question about prototyping. When you prototype, do you also predict the business value, or has the business impact been predicted already before that?
Well, we make assumptions, right, at the end of the day. I mean, we're always operating on assumptions, and we're trying to test that, right? So the essence of the prototype is like proof of value, yes, but then, you know, it's not a one-and-done deal, so you continue layer on that, right? So the first thing we do, okay, we've done that recently, two weeks back at a conference, logistics POC that we've built, right? So we validated that with experts, but then they say like, well, actually, you know, we also need that, and you know, it's some value, but we also need these and these features, right? So, and then you get indication for the next loop, right?
Sure. And one more, how do you choose AI frameworks for an organization when there is a new one coming up on a weekly basis?
AI frameworks. I mean, I don't like that term, honestly. So I think, again, stick to your process and workflow and use AI as an amplifier, right? So, because it's the GIGO, garbage in, garbage out principle has never been more true than now with generative AI, right? So if you have a good workflow, a good process, right, then you can think about, okay, so where can we introduce the amplifier? That's one way. The other way that you can think about is like, okay, we have this interface now, because that's how you can think about generative AI. It's an interface. We can chat with it, we can talk with it, we can do lots of things with it. So then you might look at your workflow and say, okay, given this, do I need to change anything? Would that bring value? Then run an experiment. Always run an experiment, measure.
Thank you. There are more questions in the Slido, but you can take a look at them later.
Happy to.
Let's give a big applause to Artur Sossin.
Thank you.